Hello, welcome to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen, and today I am sharing my June read and wrap up with you. First up, it's super hot in the UK at the moment and we don't have the luxury of air conditioning. In fact, our houses are built to keep heat in, so it's very hot in the room where I'm filming. That means that my camera will tend to overheat. I've probably got about 20 minutes of talk time before I'm going to have to take my camera downstairs to cool it down and then bring it back up, so there'll probably be quite a few cuts in this video. So I will try and be as quick as possible today. I know my wrap-ups normally run to the hour, but based on the fact of the heat and also the amount of times I'm going to probably need to stop in order to cool my camera down, I'm going to try and talk as quickly as possible. That said, I've actually got 18 books to talk about today, so it will probably still run pretty long. Now, June has been an absolutely amazing reading month for me because I actually took a 2-week holiday, which meant I had loads of time to read, and I really wanted to do a lot of mood reading and not necessarily stick to my TBR. That actually means that at the time of filming, I'm actually filming this on the 28th of June, so I still do have a couple of days left to go in the month. But I'm cutting off my reading for the month today because I need to get this recorded and edited and ready to go up a week on Monday, because next weekend I'll be at Rare London 2025, so I won't have time to do any recording or editing. So that does mean that I've actually got 2 books on the TBR that I haven't finished yet. One of them is Born of Ice, and I'm actually halfway through that now, so I'm reading that, so probably will finish it by the end of June, but just won't be able to talk about it today. And the other one was Restore Me, and I haven't even started that one yet, but I will push that forward and make sure that I read that one in July. So I'm really sorry, because I know that Restore Me was a recommendation from Vanessa 5641, so apologies Vanessa, I didn't read your book yet this month, but like I say, I definitely will read it after the book that I'm reading now. We'll start it in June, but won't finish it or talk about it until my July reading wrap up. So with that out of the way then, let's get stuck into my reading stats. And like I said, I had a great reading month and actually finished 18 books this month. It came to 5,936 pages, which was 198 pages per day. In terms of star ratings, again, I was very generous this month, but I just had such a great reading month. I loved every single thing that I read. So I had 1 3-star, 2 3.5 stars, 5 4 stars, 9 4.5 stars, and 1 5-star read. So you can tell what a great reading month I've had. And also in terms of how I read them, I had 5 ARCs this month, so slightly more than I would normally read from an ARC perspective, 3 ebooks, 9 Kindle Unlimited books, and 1 physical read as well. In terms of the subgenres, I had 5 contemporaries, 2 dark, 1 dystopian, 7 mafia, and 3 paranormal romances as well. Now, for my May read and wrap up, I decided I was going to rank the books that I read, starting from my 3 stars going through until my 5 stars. Now, I did suggest that if you liked that style of video to let me know in the comments down below, and I did get 1 or 2 comments to say that they actually liked that style. So I'm going to give it another go for the month of June, but as always, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and also remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. Okay, so we're going to kick off then with my lowest rated read for the month, and that is Dante's Choice by Zoe Blake. I rated this one 3 stars and it was 3 on the spy scale. Now, as you know, I absolutely love Zoe Blake's writing and I love her mafia romances, and this one scored slightly lower than I would normally rate her books, but that was mainly because this one is just a short story. It's only 61 pages and it was a mafia romance. It was Italian mafia, in fact. So this book is an age gap captive, forced proximity, and a revenge plot as well, and we were following Dante and Alina. In this, like I said, it was a very short story, so not much to this one, nothing really to complain about, but didn't have enough time really to develop this relationship and didn't have enough time to really warm to these characters either. But the plot of this one is that Dante is looking to leave the mafia, but he's got one last job to do, and that is to take revenge on a man who has stolen quite a lot of money for him. So his last act, if you like, before leaving the mafia is going to be to get the money back from this guy, and then he is intending to kind of retire. This guy is actually Alina's boss, so he decides he's actually going to kidnap Alina to kind of figure out what she knows, see if she can get the boss to come out of hiding, as it were, and also because he believes that she is a witness and knows what a particular person looks like, because the person who helped her boss steal this money is kind of like a secret hacker in the mafia community. No one has ever really seen his face, they don't know what he looks like, but he very much believes that Alina has possibly seen this guy and you know, wants her to kind of point him out of a crowd, as it were. And so she is his captive, but then he kind of coerces her into going to this event with her, and that is where she does actually point out the guy that she has seen, and then Dante is able to take his revenge. And at the end of this story, he realises then that he's put Alina in quite a bit of danger and decides that he's just going to take her with him when he, you know, finally kind of escapes and leaves the mafia. Like I said, this was a pretty short read, so nothing really to dislike about this one, but just not long enough for me to really get into it or buy into these characters or their romance. Next, I've got 2 3.5 stars. So the first one is Hunter's Moon by Poppy Aster. I actually read this one as an arc and I rated it 3.5 stars, rounded it up to 4 on Goodreads, and this one is 3 on the Spy scale. This is a novella length book at just 170 pages, and it's a paranormal kind of monster romance where our hero in this one, Vuk, is actually a werewolf, so a shifter, and our heroine in this one is Hannah. Incidentally, this is part of a new series that Poppy Aster is writing, and it's book 1 in the Lycan's After Dark series. So the premise of this one is that there is this really evil man who loves nothing more than hunting dangerous creatures, and it's on his bucket list to hunt and kill a werewolf. Now, werewolves don't exist on our kind of plane on Earth, and so he enlists the help of this sort of warlock to create a portal to bring a Lycan through the portal from their home plane into ours, and this is what they do. So Vuk is the unlucky werewolf who is dragged through onto Earth, and then he is put into this forest, and he's actually pulled through in wolf form as well. So he is now trapped in this forest. There's actually a magical perimeter around this forest so that he can't fully escape, and he's going to be trapped in wolf form until the full moon, when he is going to, you know, turn back into his natural state, but ultimately become the ultimate beast that this you know, this hunter is then going to be able to kind of track through the forest and unalive. However, Hannah is actually in the forest as well, because she's gone with a couple of friends on a camping trip. Now, there were signs up to say no trespassing, you can't come in this bit of the forest, but they've kind of ignored those and decided to set up camp in this forest. Now, of course, what's going to happen is that Vuk and Hannah are actually going to be fated mates. So Vuk is going to be able to smell her, and then he begins to stalk their encampment, and when her friends see that this is in fact a wolf, they kind of make a run for it. They manage to run past the magical barriers and escape, but Hannah is trapped by this werewolf inside this forest. And it's very interesting because obviously, like I say, he's still in wolf form, so they can't 100% communicate with each other, but by his actions she starts to realise that there's something a bit different about him, that he's not a regular wolf, and she realises that he doesn't really pose a threat to her, but she doesn't really know what's going on either. And then of course we're going to build up to the night of the full moon, when things are going to come to a bit of a head. So overall, this one was a very interesting read. It's a very interesting concept, and it did set up further books in this story where we learn a little bit more about the hunter, the warlock who brought the werewolf there, and also kind of what happened to her friends and what's going on in Vuk's actual home territory, if you like. So the next one is a very interesting read indeed, and I've got quite a lot to say on this one. This one was Frivolous by Veronica Lancet. Now, I rated this one 3.5 stars in the end, but I did have a strong debate with myself about what the rating should actually be. So I rounded up to 4 stars on Goodreads, and this was 3 on the Spy scale. Now, this was actually a book that I pulled from my recommendation jar, and it was recommended by Unofficial Shireen School. This one I read on Kindle Unlimited as well, and it was a mafia romance. Now, this one was quite a wild ride. We were following Sebastian and Gianna, and the general premise of this one is that Sebastian has literally just come out of prison. He went to prison for 5 years, but now he is out. Now, he is the uncle of the person who is actually heading up the mafia family. Sebastian is called by his nephew once he comes out from prison, and he says, before you kind of fall completely back into mafia life, I've got a bit of a task for you. Since you've been away for a while, no one really remembers you, or they don't know what you look like, and I've got a task for you. Gianna is a mafia princess, and she's now come of age, and her father is trying to marry her off to another family that will obviously help with, you know, strengthen their family, building an alliance, that sort of thing. And Sebastian's nephew really wants to prevent this from happening. So he sets up a plan where he wants Sebastian to be Gianna's bodyguard and then set about ruining her so that she won't be fit to marry anyone, and therefore he can ruin this alliance between his rival mafia families. Now, this is also therefore a bit of a hidden identity situation because she doesn't know who he really is. They become enemies to lovers. This is very much forbidden because obviously he's supposed to be her bodyguard and she's a mafia princess who's supposed to be arranged in marriage to someone else. Some non-con, dub-con situations, not necessarily with the hero because there's some sexual assault in this heroine's past as well. And we've got a scarred hero and a virgin heroine. Like I said, this one was very much a wild ride, and to be honest, the start of this book is a little bit ridiculous. Now, I read a lot of crazy plots, a lot of ridiculous stories, but this one was even too much for me. And when I got to about the 26% mark, I seriously considered DNFing this one. I was not enjoying it. I was not vibing with it. I really didn't like the heroine at all, and the whole setup just seemed ridiculous because the heroine had a reputation for being very bitchy, very cold, not a nice person at all. And Sebastian goes in very much believing that you know, she's going to get her comeuppance, right? Because yes, he's there to kind of ruin her, but he's happy to do this task because he absolutely thinks that she deserves it based on her behaviour, and she's really horrible to the staff in the house. She's horrible to shop workers when she goes to buy clothes and that sort of thing. And she's got a bit of a reputation with men as well because she has actually got a reputation for someone who sleeps around. But what we later discover is that this is all a facade and it's not her at all. It's not who she really is, but she pretends to be this way just to keep people at arm's length and to keep people away from her. And so she's quite a complex character in a way, but at the start of this book we very much believe that she's a very cold, spoiled mafia princess, and she lives up to her reputation because she does some ridiculous things, like I said. And there were just things that I couldn't really get past. They were so ridiculous. For example, she shoots him with a bow and arrow. She also plays a prank on him where she actually gets her friends to pour horse cum all over him. Yes, you heard that right. And I just thought, this is really kind of like petty, very, very childish. And I was thinking at this point, I'm really not into this at all. I think I'm going to DNF it. But because it was a recommendation from a jar, I decided I was going to push through and read a little bit more. And I thought I'll read just about an hour's worth of reading and just to see if it starts to get better. And surprisingly it did. We had a really big shift after around the 25% mark. So if you've ever read this one and you thought I'm going to DNF this one too, I would just say push through, because then the middle part of this book, probably right up to like the 75% mark, was really, really good. By the 26% mark, all the ridiculous stuff has happened and their relationship between Sebastian and Gianna really kind of moves forward at this point. We then start to learn really about her, why she behaves the way she does, what's happened to her in her past, and we start to get some real sympathy for her as a heroine. And we also start to really like Sebastian as well, because he starts to really see who she is as a person, and he realizes that all the assumptions he's made about her are maybe incorrect, and they really start to form this bond and they become each other's confidants and just spend some great time together. There's great chemistry that starts to build between them, and I was just absolutely loving it at this point. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. But then I felt like the end took a real turn. The third act breakup in this one I did not like at all. And then this couple do end up spending quite a bit of time apart, where he has to do a bit of grovelling, but also they have to kind of like figure out if they're going to be together at the end. And when they are finally together at the end, again, something absolutely ridiculous happens, which made me then think once more that this book was really not my cup of tea. So I feel this book really took me through the ringer, from really not liking the first quarter of this book, absolutely loving the middle section. So half of this book was really, really good, so much so that I felt it was so emotional. I had tears in my eyes at one point, and when this couple did have their third act breakup, I was kind of really kind of like sad and heartbroken for them. But then the way it kind of resolved itself at the end, and kind of one particular incident that happens at the end, I was just like, once again, I was like, this is ridiculous. This book started for me as like 2, 2.5. It definitely went up to a 4. Then it kind of lost half a point again by the end. And so, like I said, I was torn really between giving this a 3 or a 3.5, but decided I would give it a 3.5, and that's kind of where I ended on that particular book. So I'll be really interested to know what you think. If you were the one that recommended this book to me, or you've ever read this book, let me know what you thought of it. If what I've said kind of really resonates with you, or if you think I'm way off the mark, I'd really like to know. Okay, next up we've got Dante by Sadie Kincaid. This is book 1 in the Chicago Ruthless series. This is a Cosa Nostra romance, and our hero is the Don. We were following Dante, of course, as the name of the book suggests, and our heroine was Kat. This was an age gap, a captive situation, forced proximity, a very obsessed, possessive hero. It was a repaying a debt trope with a surprise baby and touch it and die vibes. I borrowed this one from Kindle Unlimited. It was 4 stars and 3.5 on the spy scale. Now, I'd wanted to read a Sadie Kincaid for absolutely ages because she is really well known in the mafia romance community. Her books get a lot of reviews, are really well loved. So I had high hopes for Dante, but it didn't 100% hit the mark for me. It was still a really good book, but I thought for me the pacing was off, and I just didn't 100% warm to these characters. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed the writing style. I am intrigued about this family and this world, and will definitely continue to read more from this author. This particular book is a repaying a debt situation, and our heroine is taken by Dante because her brother owes the mafia quite a lot of money, and so he decides he's going to take her and keep her captive. Now, he's not 100% sure what he's going to do with her, but she used to be a nurse, and he decides that maybe she'll come in handy to, you know, help him with medical emergencies where they don't want to take their men to the hospital. And of course, when she is in his house and in close proximity with her, they are going to develop this relationship. Now, they do have a lot of chemistry, and they start a sexual relationship fairly early in this book, and so it's very much lust focused at the start before they actually develop feelings. And Dante really had made it clear to the heroine Kat that he was really not interested in an emotional relationship. He threatened her multiple times that once her usefulness had come and gone, he would very much kick her out or hand her over, or, you know, unalive her. And I think this created an unnecessarily kind of divide between them. The heroine then was understandably very insecure about this relationship, and this led her to make some decisions, which is always really frustrating, right? Because despite him telling her not to try and run away, she's going to try and run away. This book did have some really good qualities as well. Like I said, I really did like the writing style. It really set up some of the characters for the future books. We learn much more about Dante, his family, his father, what's going on with her and her brother as well. And so I really kind of like the plot of this one. But like I said, overall, it was just the pacing was a bit off for me in terms of how the story played out. Next up, I read King of Sinners by Tammy Andresen, and this was book 1 in the Lords of Las Vegas series. This one was another age gap billionaire romance with close proximity, stalking, a very obsessed hero, touch her and die vibes, and a virgin heroine. And this was also mafia adjacent, I would say. It's definitely set in a kind of a mafia world, but our hero himself wasn't in the mafia. However, he was head of a kind of a very powerful family in Las Vegas. They own a lot of property, and so they are no strangers to morally grey concepts. They're no strangers to violence, and they do interact quite a lot with other mafia families. We were following Mason and Charlotte in this one. I read this one as a Kindle Unlimited book. It was 4 stars and 3 on the spy scale. So this one starts where our heroine Charlotte is actually dating Mason's brother, but she's only been on 3 dates with him, and she's about to end it with him because she has actually met Mason. She actually met Mason on their 2nd date. She realised then that she was really attracted to Mason. They had a lot of great chemistry, and she just decided it wasn't fair on his brother to continue to go out with him because she had no interest in him at all, and so she's about to break it off. But that night they do happen to be in a nightclub, and stuff goes down and shots are fired, and Mason ends up kind of to have to shield her with his body, protect her, but then swears her to secrecy, and he basically warns her and says, you've seen something that you shouldn't. I'm now going to have to clear up the crime scene, but I need to ensure that you're not going to tell anyone, And if I do find out that you've told anyone you've seen, you're going to be in serious trouble. But I suggest that you never see my brother again, you never come around here again, and you know, we'll just call it quits. They go separate ways, and she doesn't see Mason or his brother then for 2 years. But she's still in Las Vegas, and she is just finishing up college, and she's also working really hard because she obviously wants to earn enough money. She wants to finish her schooling and then earn enough money so that she can move out of Las Vegas and put the whole situation behind her. But one night she's walking home from work and she sees a crime in an alleyway, and she actually sees 2 mafia people in a bit of a gunfight. Now they see that she's sore, and so they go after her, but she is actually rescued by Mason's other brother and taken to Mason. And now Mason is livid because he's like, what am I going to do with you? Not only did you see a crime 2 years ago and I told you to keep your nose clean, but now you've just witnessed a crime between 2 other mafia families. They're going to come after you. You forced me to have to save you and put you up in my apartment to keep you safe, but I don't actually know what I'm going to do with you, and this is not kind of how I wanted things to play out. So he's in a very difficult situation because, like I said, he's not technically in the mafia, but has a lot to do with these mafia families. They really want the witness and, you know, for him to hand her over. But he decides actually probably the safest thing for her is if he marries her, and that is how that plays out. So this was my first read from Tammy Andresen. I really enjoyed it, and definitely will be reading more in this series. It was 4 stars, like I said, and 3 on the spice scale. Apologies if you can hear something in the background. That's actually a lawnmower, because it is such a nice day here in the UK. All of the neighbours are out mowing their lawns, and I just need to press on. So like I said, I do apologise if you can hear something in the background, but hopefully it won't last too long. Okay, next up we've got When It Rains by Montana Fyre, and this is book 1 in the Frost Industries series. This is an Irish mafia romance, and our hero Raynes was an enforcer and our heroine was called Emerson. This is an age gap, close proximity, obsessed hero, possessive hero, touch her and die vibes, and a workplace romance as well. I really enjoyed this one, gave it 4 stars, and it was 3.5 on the spice scale. Now, this is only the second book I've read from Montana Fyre, and the first book I read was Severed Ties, which was a stalker romance, and I absolutely loved it. That book was a spin-off from the Frost Industries series, so I've been really interested in picking this series up, and I thought I would start this series, especially because I'm going to London next weekend. Montana Fyre is actually going to be there, and I've pre-ordered the Frost Industries like omnibus edition that she's got as a special edition for the sign-in, and so I thought I better start it and just check that I like it before I go and pick up the book. And luckily I really did, and like I say, we'll definitely be going on to read more in this series. At the start of this one, Raynes is obviously part of the mafia family, and he's arrested and kind of like held in custody. He's not actually charged with anything, but his lawyer suggests that he might want to do some community service just to sweeten things over with the police. And so one of the things that he agrees to do is community service at this day centre for kids. And it's Emerson and her father who run this centre, and they basically, it's in a, you know, not a great neighbourhood, but it's important for them to provide a safe space for kids to come before and after school. They provide kind of breakfast and meals for these children that wouldn't necessarily get 3 meals a day at home, and also there is a lot of opportunities to play sports, basketball, that sort of thing at the centre to, you know, give the kids something to do as well while they are there. This centre though is really struggling. It's lost quite a lot of local funding, and they completely are relying on people donating to the centre, and so they're really struggling. In addition to that, our heroine Emerson is also struggling personally financially because she had an ex-boyfriend who took out loads of credit cards in her name, ran up a lot of debt, and now has kind of left her with all of this debt. So not only she is working at the centre, she's working a couple of other jobs as well, and also trying to go through college to be a child's counsellor, because she really wants to be able to counsel and support the kids in this centre as well. So she's working really hard, she's permanently exhausted, she's at the end of her tether. But of course Raynes is going to come along and start to make her life a lot easier. At first she's very kind of like suspicious of him, and she's not sure how it's going to work with him there. but he instantly has a connection to this centre, to the kids. He's got a lot of money, so he helps out in financially in some areas, but also helps her because she is trying to put together this charity gala dinner. And of course he knows a lot of people, he has got a lot of influence with some very powerful and rich people in the city, and so he basically fills up all her tables and gets loads of people to donate to the centre as well, so that they can continue what they are doing, but really lends her a hand, you know, both emotionally and financially, but also with her time as well, because he's like takes the load off her in terms of organising this gala. Of course, it's not going to be long till he figures out exactly what's going on, what her ex did to her, and that he's not a nice guy. And so he sets about determining that she is now going to belong to him, and he's going to make her life much easier by paying off her debts, getting rid of the ex, and essentially forcing her to fall in love with him. Like I said, I really like this one, and we'll definitely be going on to read more in the series. Next up then, I've got In the Details by Julia Wolfe, and this is the physical read that I had this month, so I read this copy. Now this was a book that I got from Jen from the Book Refuge. As I've said before, I am one of her Patreons, and I subscribe to a quarterly book box, so I'm in the tier. I'm very lucky to be in the tier for the quarterly book box, and this is the book I picked. I can't remember if it was for Q4 of last year or the start of this year, but this is not fully annotated, but there are parts of this book where Jen has kind of like tabbed some of her favourite parts and written some comments in here as well. So it's always a joy to read any books that I get from Jen. And also it's always a joy to read anything from Julia Wolfe, because I really have loved every single book that I've read from this author. Now this wasn't my favourite Julia Wolfe that I've ever read, but it was still a really good and enjoyable read, and I rated this one 4 stars, and it was 3.5 on the Spy scale. This one is book 3 in the Mile High Billionaires series. It's a contemporary romance, it's set in Denver, and we're following Jake and Clara. This very much deals with, I would say, a damaged hero and heroine. They've both been through some difficult times in the past, particularly with their ex-partners. They share a one-night stand together. We've got a plus-size heroine. Both of them are single parents. It's kind of a workplace romance, and also a bit of a hidden identity to start. Not so much a hidden identity, but during their one-night stand or several encounters where they are together at the start of this book, they don't really know who each other is, and later they're going to find out. Both Jake and Clara are both very wealthy, and their families own very similar or very compatible businesses. Clara's family own this motorbike company, so they actually build and sell motorbikes, and Jake's family own a kind of a garage of sorts that kind of repairs bikes, sells parts. Now this couple, like I said, don't know who each other is at the start of this book, and in fact both of them are motorbike lovers, and they like to kind of burn off steam by going out on their motorbikes. And the first time they meet is in this sort of motorbike bar. They kind of have a lot of chemistry together, they share a couple of drinks, and then they spend the night together. And over the course of the following year, they happen to bump into each other on 2 or 3 more occasions in the same place, and every time it's the same. They always hook up with each other when they see each other. Neither of them are looking for love or permanent relationship, because both of them are single parents and they're really protective of their children, but they do kind of look forward to the possibility of bumping into one another. Now they get their chance because their companies are trying to do a bit of a deal with each other, where Jake's company wants to sell motorbike parts and be kind of like the main repair place where people would take the motorbikes that are built by Clara's family. Although they're not directly involved in the deal, their brothers are both very much involved in this deal, and they first see each other when they are around the board table starting a negotiation for what this contract might look like. Now at this point, when they realise who each other is, they kind of agree to see each other more frequently and start a relationship with each other, as long as the kids don't get involved and they don't talk about work during their time together. But of course their kids are really important in their lives, and slowly but surely over time they're eventually going to find out that each of them is a single parent, a bit more about their kids. And this is going to be the main source of stress for them, because our heroine has gone through quite a traumatic past with her ex-husband, and he's very, very protective of her daughter. And likewise, our hero as well is also very, very protective of his daughter, because an ex actually kind of up and left them, and his daughter was pretty heartbroken over the situation. In addition to being very protective of her daughter, our heroine Clara is also really, really struggles with trust and trusting people. And as part of this third act breakup, she very much perceives that Jake has broken her trust. And so the third act breakup for me was, while understandable, I thought it was very, very one-sided on her part, because she really, really gave Jake a hard time, and Jake was really, really prepared to do whatever he needed to do to repair their relationship and to do all the graft running he needed to. But I did feel a bit sorry for Jake, because she actually behaved in a way that I think Jake had as much right as she did to be unhappy about this situation. And yet I think all of the responsibility fell on Jake to try and repair this relationship. And so this is the main reason why this is not my favourite Julia Wolf. Overall, I loved it. I love these characters. I love this world. Her writing style is absolutely fantastic. So absolutely flew through this book, really, really enjoyed it. But because of this third act breakup and just the way the heroine behaved meant that I had to deduct a star for this particular one, but still absolutely would recommend. So my next one was Dreams of a Dark Prince by Kresley Cole. This is book 11 in the Immortals After Dark series. This is a paranormal romance between a Valkyrie and a Berserker, and we were following Chase and Regan the Radiant. So this was a captive situation, a very damaged and scarred hero, enemies to lovers, fated mates. We had flashbacks to the past, forced proximity, obsessed hero, tortured hero, and a second chance romance for this couple as well. Now I'm going to try not to go into too much detail for this one, mainly because I am doing the read along with Amber from Amber Reads Romance, and this evening I'm actually going to be taking part in a live show with Amber and Jen from the Book Refuge, where we're going to be talking about this book in detail, as well as the next book in this series, Lothaire, as well. So if you want to know my full thoughts on that and kind of get into the discussions about this particular book, then I highly recommend you go back and watch that live show if you didn't join us in real time, because by the time this book goes up, it will have been posted about a week before. And also it's kind of hard to kind of explain. We're quite deep into this series now. This is book 11, so we're quite deep into this series now. We've met quite a lot of characters, so quite a lot of the characters that we've seen before and characters that we'll see in future books are very much part of this book. And you know, it's really, really hard to describe how this entire kind of world works. We've seen a lot of world building, and like I said, we've seen a lot of different characters so far. But essentially the premise of this one is that Regan the Radiant is a Valkyrie. She is the daughter of gods, and her father is Woden. Now Chase, our hero in this particular one, is a reincarnated version of Aiden, and Aiden was a berserker over a millennia ago, and he was Regan's fated mate. But berserkers are actually mortal. They're not immortal, but they have special powers, so they're more enhanced, they're more powerful than a regular human, because they worship and fight on behalf of Woden, who happens to be Regan's father. Now, if you can win 200 battles in Woden's name as a berserker, then he grants you immortality. So when Aiden and Regan first meet, Regan actually goes to him for help. He instantly recognises that she is his fated mate, but she is still a young girl, and he basically suggests to her that she goes and lives with his family for a few years, 5 or 6 years, until she becomes of the proper age, and then he'll come back to get her as his fated mate. Now she's not going to have any of this. She's, even from a young age, she was very, very independent. She's like, I'm not going to be beholden to this guy. Who does he think he is? And of course she kind of runs away, and she, you know, carries on doing what Valkyries do. Of course Aiden is going to be searching for her for many years. Now as these immortals transition, they are supposed to kind of go into heat, so they kind of like seek out sexual encounters, and so she decides actually it's probably time for her to reunite with Aiden and they can explore their sexuality together. And so Aiden is so relieved when he finally catches up with Regan, and she is willingly going to be coming to his bed. But Regan warns him and says, we can't fully consummate our relationship because Woden is not going to be happy that his daughter is sleeping with a mortal, and therefore you really do have to win your 200 battles, become immortal, and then we can truly be together. And so they attempt to set out to do this. Aiden swears that he's going to achieve his immortality, but they cannot help themselves, and eventually they do end up sleeping together. And soon after this happens, Aiden is tragically unalived by vampire, but he's so tied to Regan and his love for her that he ends up being reincarnated time and again, at least 4 times that we know of, and in each life he's kind of destined to seek Regan out. But every time he recovers his memories and he kisses her for the first time, within 24 hours of them being together, he ends up being unalived again. And so in this version of Aiden, he is now Chase Declan, and he's also our biggest enemy because he and his boss Webb are actually running a facility on this island where they are actually capturing and torturing immortals. So Chase is pretty much a bad guy. He absolutely hates immortals, and in fact he's recently captured Regan, holding her as a prisoner, and starts to do some pretty horrific things, not only to her but to her friends that he's also captured. And so while she recognises that he is her fated mate, reincarnated, she's going to struggle quite a lot with the fact that he's not a particularly nice guy in this reincarnation. So what are these two to do? Now, this is the darkest of all the books that we've read so far. It was pretty grueling to read in parts because the immortals are really mistreated in this place. There's a lot of torture. They're even vivisected, so it is not pleasant to read at all. But despite that, it was a surprisingly cozy read in the sense that we got to spend time with some of our favourite characters. We learn more about some of the Lorians that we've come to know and love, and we find out much more about some other characters that we're going to encounter soon, including Lothaire. Okay, so that was the last of the 4-star reads. I'm moving on to 4.5-star reads now, and like I said at the start, I was very generous this month because I had such a fantastic time reading that I really enjoyed everything that I read and really wanted to give some good ratings out. But the lowest of the 4.5-star reads, or like my least favourite of all the 4.5 stars if I'm ranking them, was Dance of Madness by Jagger, which is book 3 in his The Darkest Dance series. This is a mafia romance series, and this one was between a Russian mafia heroine, Mila, and an Italian mafia hero, Nero. As all of the books in the series have been, our heroine is a ballet dancer, and she's part of the same sort of ballet troupe as some of the other heroines in this book. This one was quite spicy. I rated it 4.5 on the spice scale. Lots of BDSM kink elements to this one, including primal play and consensual non-consent. And we are dealing with very much with a damaged hero, enemies to lovers, grumpy sunshine, hidden identity. These two are pen pals for a time, obsessed possessive hero, secret society, and touch it and die vibes. So quite a brutal book, this one, but I absolutely loved the intensity of this one, loved the romance between these two, and also the spicy scenes as well. Now this one starts where my Mila is kind of tricked into going to this house. There's an old mansion that is said to be haunted, but she's tricked into going there and saying something in particular in one of the bedrooms. Unbeknownst to her, this is a bit of a setup because Nero owns this place and he uses it as a bit of a sex pad, shall we say, because he has a primal play kink, and he often gets his sexual partners to meet him in this place where they play a little bit of CNC primal play, and he loves nothing more than to chase down his women and then force them to do things. Mila also has this type of kink, this type of fantasy, and thoroughly enjoys every single moment. And it's at that point we realise that this couple actually have known each other in the past, and we start to unravel exactly what happened to them in the past, how they knew each other, and you know what has kept them apart all this time. And slowly but surely over time they continue to meet up, they continue to act out their fantasies, and they start to figure out who each other is and what they kind of meant to each other. So I really like this one. It's probably my favourite of this series so far, hence I gave it 4.5 stars, because all the others I gave 4 stars. But I just, like I say, I absolutely love the intensity of this one, the romance between this two, and also how spicy it was. So a really top read from Jagger. Next up I've got Empire of Seduction by Mila Finelli, and this is book 2 in her New York State of Mafia series. I actually read this one as an arc, but I really wanted to make sure that I got a physical copy of this book because I'm building my Mila Finelli collection, and rated this one 4.5 stars, and it was 3.5 on the spy scale. This is an Italian mafia romance, and we were following Vito D'Agostini, who is Enzo's brother, and in the previous series we saw that he ended up taking over the mafia family in Vancouver, and so he is now kind of stateside, if you like, so he's in North America. And then our heroine in this one is Maggie, and Maggie happens to part own a vineyard with her brother in Pisano, which is in New York State, and she is best friends with the heroine from book 1 in this series, so that is their connection. Now these two actually meet because they have a one-night stand in Las Vegas. They're very attracted to each other. Like I said, they have a one-night stand, absolutely amazing night together, completely compatible from a sexual perspective, but neither of them are interested in a relationship, and they obviously go their separate ways. Now they then meet again because Vito turns up at Maggie's vineyard. Now when she first sees him, she's going to assume obviously that he's tracked her down and he's there for her, and she's not too happy about this situation. But it's even worse than she thought, because we then find out that her brother actually has also met Vito in the past. He also met him in Las Vegas, and in fact he met him while he was gambling and has lost 70% of the vineyard to Vito, and now Vito is here to you know, collect, and Maggie is going to fight him at every turn. She is livid with her brother. She's very protective of this vineyard, and she absolutely despises Vito for coming to collect what he's due. Of course, he is going to dig his heels in, and he decides that he's going to stick around to make sure that things go smoothly in this transition. And then we start to find out a little bit more about the vineyard. It's actually struggling, it's not doing so well, and so while Maggie fights him at every turn, Vito is actually a very good thing for this vineyard, because he's prepared to put in a lot of money into overhauling the facility, putting in some new technology, some new machines and tools that they need, upgrading some of the houses on the property for B&B rental, and generally just taking care of her because she's under a lot of strain, under a lot of pressure. And so, like I say, she kind of fights him at every turn, but really everything he's doing is for her benefit and for the good of this vineyard. But they are going to clash quite significantly. Now, of course, they do have amazing chemistry together. They already know how good they are in bed together, so they are basically going to continue to have a relationship while they are together, even though Maggie really hates herself for continuing to get into bed with this guy. But also, of course, is a mafia romance, so we do see a bit of mafia action. And what I loved about this is that we get to see some of Vito's other family members. So we knew Massimo, which is Vito's brother, from when he was on the yacht with Enzo, but we didn't get to know him too well, so we see more of him in this book and what he's become since they are now free of the yacht. And also we're introduced to their sister, and their sister is going to play a big role going forward as well, because he's invited her to come to North America to be his new consigliere. So his sister is going to play quite a big role, not only in this book but in future books as well, I assume. So really enjoyed this one. I love the world that Mila Finelli has created, and I also love the cameo appearances from some of the other characters from not just this series but the previous series as well. Next I've got another arc, which was Sinister Promise by Zoe Blake. This is book 6 in her Ivanov crime family series. It's a Russian mafia family that we're following, and this time we're following Pavel, who is the enforcer of this family, and Elena. Now this was 4.5 stars, 4 on the spy scale, probably my favourite from the series so far. And Pavel was very much marketed as Zoe Blake's most unhinged hero yet, and he did live up to that hype and that reputation, but he still didn't go as far as I was expecting him to. And I don't know what that says about me as a reader, but I really loved him, and I think give me all the crazy. I absolutely loved it. So this one is an age gap, arranged forced marriage situation. There's some BDSM elements to this one. It's consensual, non-consent or dubious consent. We have an over-the-top hero. There's a surprise baby as part of this one as well, tattooed character, and a virgin heroine. So in this one, this is a case where our heroine Alina is witness to a crime. She sees Pavel committing a crime and then he attempts to go after her. Of course, she's going to try and run and he's going to chase her, and eventually he is going to catch up with her and then force her to be in close proximity with him. So he's essentially going to keep her captive. Now, like I say, he is the most unhinged one of all. So he does do some pretty dark things, including putting a sensory deprivation hood over her, chaining her to his bed and various other things as well. Still, of course, with all Zoe Blake's heroes, while he is over the top, he's also very possessive. He comes to become obsessed with the heroine and will ultimately do anything for them. Also deeply sort of sexualized characters, lots of spice between them, loads of chemistry, and I really felt it between this couple. So what I absolutely loved about this one is the intensity of the hero. I loved how crazy he was, how unhinged he was, but how much he cared about our heroine. And one of the best things about this one is that it ends on a cliffhanger, because Zoe Blake decided to leave us on quite a big cliffhanger as we go into the final book of this series. I can't believe she did it to us, but she's not going to leave us waiting too long, because the next book in the series comes out really soon. And again, I'm part of the ARC team, so hopefully I'll have my hands on that in early July. Next up, I've got Tell Me You Love Me by Emilia Finn, and this is book 1 in her new series Love and War, and it's a brand new series that is not connected directly to any of her other worlds, because Emilia Finn is quite a prolific writer. She's written about 70 books to this point, and quite a lot of them are series that very much spin off from her original series, The Rolling On Crew, and around this kind of world that she's built. So most of the characters from all of the other series, they're either next gen characters, or they are in the same kind of town, or they know each other in some way, or are related in some way. But this is a brand new series. This is a sports romance, so she's going back to her roots. This is an MMA fighter, but it's really a small town contemporary sort of second chance style of romance. And so we're following Tommy, our fighter, and Elena. So this is very, very angsty. We've got a very damaged hero. We have flashbacks to the past, because like I said, this is a second chance, and it's a situation where it's not his baby. The very, very start of this book, we see our heroine driving home, and she's driving home with her autistic son. She has been gone from her small town where she grew up for 10 years. And it's here where we learn that she was childhood sweethearts with a guy called Tommy. They were inseparable, madly in love with each other, planning a future together. Then shortly after prom, so shortly after high school, when she's just turned 18 and they have their prom night, she literally leaves town without a word, any explanation of where she's gone, and she just disappears for 10 years. We learn that in that 10-year period she has got married and had a child, and now her marriage is ended. She is getting a divorce, and her mother is sick, so she's packed up her belongings and she's driving back to her hometown with her son to go and look after her mother. And of course, she hasn't really been keeping too close an eye on Tommy, doesn't realise he's still in town, and unbeknownst to her, actually Tommy, he's twins with another guy called Chris. Tommy and Chris have been still hanging out in town. All this time they have trained to be fighters. They've opened up their own gym, and in fact Tommy is a world champion and he's training for his next fight, which is to kind of retain his championship belt. Also, they do a lot of work around town, and in particular they still help her mum out with, you know, yard work and that sort of thing. So still have remained very, very close to her mother, and she is not prepared for this at all. And obviously when she gets back home, she's gonna pretty much bump straight into Tommy, and Tommy is gonna see her, and he is very, very angry about the situation. He was madly in love with her. He's been heartbroken, full of rage. He's never been able to forget her, and she is still the love of his life. And he's so angry with her that she left without even a word, no explanation, and the fact that she got married and had a child. When they first bump into each other after all this time, Tommy is just really, really angry, and so he gives her quite a hard time. But she makes it very clear to him that she is back in town, but she doesn't want to rekindle anything. She doesn't want to explain herself either. She's got no intention of explaining what happened or why she went away, and they should just really stay out of each other's way. Of course, that is not going to go to plan. They are going to continue to bump into each other, and their lives are going to become more interconnected. And as the story plays out, Tommy starts to observe more about her son, realises that he is autistic, and he does share a remarkable resemblance to his brother Chris. And so he starts to wonder in the back of his mind if Chris has got anything to do with this and the reason she ran away. This is a brilliant romance, very, very angsty. I love the way this played out. It wasn't quite a 5-star because of just a couple of sticking points with the plot and how the third act kind of played out. There was some unanswered questions that were left, and I don't know if they're going to be answered in future books, and if they are, I might reevaluate how I kind of like overall rate this book. But I absolutely loved it, and I was so glad to be back in Emilia Finn's world, and I've got some more books of hers coming up shortly. So the next one, a 4.5-star read, this was another arc that I got, was Protected by Claire Kent. And this is a standalone set in her Kindled universe. So this is a post-apocalyptic dystopian romance, dystopian world. And if you've read any of the Kindle series, then from a chronological perspective, this one, while a standalone, takes place between Last Light, which was the kind of the prequel to Kindled, and Haven, which is the first book in the Kindled series, and is going to set up a new series that Claire Kent is writing called The Wilds. I absolutely love this one. I think it's one of my favourites that I've read from her in this series, and it was very reminiscent to me of how I felt when I read Embers, and Embers was one of my favourites of the Kindled series that I've read so far. In this particular one, we're following Dec and Lila. There's an age gap between these two. There's also a language barrier because Dec does not speak. He's chosen to be mute because of the trauma that he's experienced after impact. They go on a road trip together, friends to lovers, and they are in close proximity together as a result. At the very start of this one, we learned that Lila is now alone. She was kind of surviving with a boyfriend, but he's recently passed away, and she is, you know, scavenging for food. One day, while she is kind of hanging out in a Walmart, this group of people, this group of travellers come along. She sees an opportunity to steal some food from the back of one of the vehicles that they're travelling in, and when she attempts to take some food, Dec actually has seen her do this, and he kind of stops her from taking the food. But then they also question her in terms of if she's alone, what she's doing there. When they realise that she's by herself, they decide to invite her to join their gang, and she then kind of travels with them. And this is a group of people, they are good people, because we know that in the past that there's been some roving gangs that are not so good, but this group, while they need to do whatever they need to do to survive, they generally have a good moral compass, and they're just going from town to town, scavenging what they can, camping where it's safe, and ultimately looking for more permanent lodgings. As they go through this trip, Lila and Dec become very good friends. They become close. She starts to teach him sign language because she knows a little bit of ASL, and so she helps him. If he's choosing not to speak, she wants to also help him choose to be able to communicate, particularly with her, and they do form this relationship, which becomes a romantic relationship as well. And I just absolutely love this one. Claire Kent does such a great job of really developing characters and romances, and also really showing what life would be like and some of the sacrifices that people have to make in a post-apocalyptic situation. And yeah, their group is going to encounter some bad people. They're going to have to deal with that, but ultimately they are going to reach safety and get a HEA for this couple. So really loved it. Really enjoyed Claire Kent's writing and would highly recommend. Okay then, so the next 3 books I'm going to talk about are books by Emilia Finn. So Emilia Finn wrote one of my favourite books from 2021, in fact the favourite book from 2021, Pawns in the Bishop's Game, which was book 1 of the Checkmate series. Kane Bishop, who is a hero from that series, is one of my favourite heroes, and I love that book so much. I read it twice in succession. I recently read it just to, you know, relive the initial experience and to see if I still liked it as much as I did before, and I've been meaning to carry on with this series. What I discovered though after reading that book is that this is the third series that Emilia Finn had written, and so I decided to go back and start the first book from series 1, because as I said before, she's written a lot of books and they all kind of spin off from each other. So I read all of the Rolling On series, I read most of the books from the second series, but that series didn't jive with me as much as some of the others did, so I never read the last 2 books in that series, which was also a duet about the same couple. And I kept meaning to go back to Checkmate and carry on reading, and I finally decided, you know what, now is the time. So I picked up books 2, 3 and 4 in this series. Absolutely loved them, rated them all 4.5 stars. The first one, which is book 2, is Till the Sun Dies, and it is a contemporary small town romance. It's set immediately after the events of book 1, and we were following Angelo and Lainey. This is quite an angsty story. You do need to check your trigger warnings for this one because it does involve suicide ideation and attempted suicide. Our heroine Lainey went through quite a horrific experience in book 1, and now she's left very traumatised by the experience, very, very depressed, feeling kind of worthless, and that her friends and family members would be better off without her, and just really struggling to, you know, live how she used to live. Before the trauma that she's experienced, she was very, very, very vicarious, very full of fun, liked to do, you know, fun things, and was very kind of a bubbly personality. And now she feels very much that she's completely lost herself, is very, very scared, and really doesn't like to leave the house, and is just very, very fearful. Angelo, our hero, has always been in love with Lainey ever since they were little, and so they've been in a very close friendship group. He is best friends with her brother, but he's always been in love with her, and he never liked her boyfriend, which is the root of her trauma, but he's always kind of been keeping an eye on her, looking out for her. And now the full truth of what happened to her has finally come out. She is now free from her ex-boyfriend, but she needs to kind of rehabilitate. He is going to be there for her, and slowly but surely through the course of this book, he brings her out of her shell. She learns to trust people again, she learns to trust him again, and she starts to realise that there's more to their friendship than she first thought, and they have an amazing experience together. And so I really, really like how Emilia Finn dealt with this kind of trauma that this heroine had been through, and Angelo was the perfect hero for her. But while that sounds like he's kind of a sweet guy, he's actually got a dark side to him as well, because like I said, there's nothing he won't do for her. When he finally finds out what's actually happened to her, he is absolutely going to seek retribution on her behalf, and so he enlists the help of Kane Bishop to really take revenge on her boyfriend, and they do that in a very interesting, very violent way. So it's not all, you know, it's not all sweet and innocent. Angelo, like I said, has got a dark side to him, but I absolutely enjoyed it so much. And the biggest selling point for me of this book is that Kane Bishop plays a massive role in this book, because part of this book is they go on a road trip and she kind of rediscovers herself through this road trip, and Kane Bishop goes along on his journey with her because Lainey happens to be twin sisters with Jess, who is the heroine from book 1 and the love of Kane's life. So of course, when Angelo wants to take Lainey on a road trip, then Kane and their sister are going to go with them. And I just loved the part that he played, and it added a depth of humour to this book that I think it really, really needed. So loved it. If you haven't read anything by Emilia Finn, I honestly think this author is so underrated. She has got a really big fan base, but I don't hear many booktubers or YouTubers talking about her. So if you haven't heard of her before, then I highly recommend you look into her and start from the beginning, if you can, from the Rolling On series. Okay, so while I was in the flow of this one, I was like, right, I'm going to carry on with the series, absolutely loving it. And so I started book 3, which is actually part 1 of a duet about the same couple. We're following Riley and Andy. So the first book in the duet is called Castling the Rook, and the second part is Playing for Keeps. Now, the first part of this book is only 210 pages. The second part of the duet is 250 pages. So technically these two could have been one book, but I do feel like it kind of needed that break because there's a bit of a cliffhanger, and also the end of the first book really does put a line under the sand in terms of the storyline. and I'll explain, because this book very much starts before the timeline in book 1. Like I said, we're following Riley and Andy. Riley is a police officer, but he's kind of a junior police officer, so he's the rookie. He's known as the rookie, and he works in the same police station as the police officers from the second series. It's Oz, and I cannot remember for the life of me the name of the sheriff, but it will come back to me, I'm sure, as I continue talking. At the very start of this book, like I said, this is a timeline before the start of book 1, but we see that Riley's invited to a barbecue with some other police officers and all of the girls that we've come to know and love from the other series and from series 2 are kind of at this barbecue. Also there is Andy, and Andy happens to be the cousin of a key character from book 2, and she's also there at the barbecue, and Riley and Andy definitely have this shared connection at this barbecue. Now, while he's at this barbecue, Riley actually takes a phone call, and he picks up a phone call from the FBI, and they ask him to become part of this special task force, which means that he is going to be introduced to Kane Bishop, and it means he's going to have to lie to his boss. And this puts him in a really difficult predicament, because he's going to be getting intel from the local sheriff's office, passing it over to the FBI, which is going to be helping Kane Bishop in some way. And so he feels really torn about this, because Kane Bishop is a notorious criminal in town, and his boss, his life work is to basically gather enough evidence against Kane and the criminal organisation in town that they're going to bring it down. And so Riley is really torn about what's going on here. Doesn't want to do it, but kind of is left with no choice really. And so any budding romance that would have been happened between Riley and Andy is kind of put on hold. However, time passes, and it comes to a point where two of the characters, Oz and her cousin, are going to get married, and so Andy comes back into town and she has another opportunity to spend with Riley, and they end up spending the night together, and they have great chemistry and they have a fantastic night together. She's not really looking for a permanent relationship, but he is totally hooked on her from the start and really is trying to convince her, let's get together. The issue is that she doesn't live in town, she lives a couple of hours away in the city, and so they have to kind of start this long-term relationship. But she really doesn't want to, she's really scared. And what becomes a cliffhanger in this book is because there's a pivotal point in the timeline for the first book in this series, Points in the Bishop's Game. Riley is actually shot. But this coincides with them having an argument, and she tries to get hold of him and he doesn't call her back, and so she thinks that he is ignoring her. And so this book obviously ends on a cliffhanger, because she's gone back to the city, she thinks their relationship is over, but actually we know that Riley has been injured. And that is the end of the first book. I feel really bad telling you that that is a cliffhanger, because obviously it kind of spoils the ending in a way. However, in order to explain what happens in the following book, I need to put that into context. So by the time we get to Playing for Keeps, we're now in a situation where all of the events of book 1 in this series have kind of happened. The whole town is reeling from what's happened, and people have forgotten to tell Andy what's happened. Eventually she calls her cousin up, and a couple of weeks has passed, 2 or 3 weeks has passed, and it's only at this point that Andy discovers that Riley has not been ignoring her deliberately. He's actually been in hospital this whole time. And it's also at this moment that she realises that she is in love with him, she wants to be with him, she's made a terrible mistake arguing with him, and so she decides that she's going to pack up her life from the city and move to this small town. And in fact she's going to move right into Riley's house, because as a result of his injury, Riley has had to have his leg amputated from the knee down, and he's going to need a lot of rehabilitation and support to rehabilitate. Luckily, Andy, actually one of her jobs is as a physiotherapist, and she's no stranger to helping amputees, and she decides that she's going to go in there. Now of course Riley is extremely angry, full of rage about what's happened to him. He is not willing at first to kind of confront what's happened to him, doesn't want to accept help from anybody, is really stubborn about it, and he says some horrible things to Andy and kind of forces her to leave the hospital, doesn't want to see her. Of course we know that's because he doesn't want her to be kind of stuck with him in his new condition and is very, very afraid of being rejected by her. But she is very, very tenacious, and she is not going to be put off by a few horrible words. And in fact, she breaks into his house, cleans it up, and makes it safe for him to come home by installing ramps and handles, installing a seat in the shower and that sort of thing, to make sure that his home is ready for him when he comes home, at first in a wheelchair, and eventually he's going to learn to use crutches before he gets his new prosthetic. So I absolutely love this one. I thought the first part of this duet was absolutely fantastic. In particular, I love the fact, again, that we get to see a lot of Kane Bishop, but we also get to see what's going on in the background. So we get a lot of information from book one in terms of what's going on with Kane Bishop, what's going on with his story, but we now see the same story from Riley's perspective and what's going on from his perspective, leading up to some key events from that story. So I absolutely love that, really, really did. If you are a fan of book one and haven't read the rest of the series yet, like me, then I highly recommend you carry on, because that's brilliant to see. And then the second part of this duet is very much focused on this couple. They have a lot of page time together, and really it's all about Andy trying to help him come to terms with his new reality, his new life, but really, really encouraging him and trying to get him to understand that his life isn't over. He can live an absolutely normal life again. It's going to take some work, but by getting himself a prosthetic, learning to walk again is going to mean that he can do all the things that he used to be able to do, right? And she's going to give him the emotional and physical support that he needs in order to get there. And I just love the development between this couple and how they managed to make things work. So would highly recommend. My favourite 4.5-star read that I read in the month of June was Lothaire by Kresley Cole. This is book 12 in the Immortals After Dark series. This is a paranormal romance, obviously, this time between a vampire, Lothaire is a vampire, and a human woman called Ellie. This is fated mate, age gap, enemies to lovers. There's some flashbacks in here, forced proximity, virgin heroine, and in fact I've also put this as an ex-con romance because unfortunately for Ellie, she does end up having to go to prison and is broken out by Lothaire. Again, I'm going to try and keep this brief because we're really deep into this series, and also we explored it in lots of detail in the live show that I've already mentioned. So again, if you want to know more full thoughts, not just from me but from Amber and Jen as well, then go back and watch that live show. But finally we get Lothaire's story. This is the one that I've been waiting for because I know it was Jen's favourite. Everyone loves Lothaire, and he has made lots of cameo appearances in all the other books until this point. And in fact, he had quite a big part to play in book 11. And finally we get to learn more about the enemy of old, his backstory, you know, his origin story, why he is the way he is, and what his end game is, because we know he's been working towards an end game, and we finally get to figure out what that is. And he's also been hiding a secret from everyone, and that is the fact that he's found his fated mate. He is in fact blooded. He's found his fated mate, and that happens to be a human called Ellie. The thing is though, Ellie is actually possessed by a demon goddess, and Lothaire very much believes that his fated mate is the demon goddess. He can't possibly imagine that his fated mate would be human, and so he initially is trying to search for a way to remove Ellie's soul so that the demon goddess can fully take over and live in that body, and then they can properly consummate their relationship and, you know, live happily ever after. To do that, he needs to find a mystical object, and in order to keep Ellie safe from his enemies, he decides that he's going to leave her safe in prison. In fact, for some murders that the demon goddess committed, not Ellie, but while she was in Ellie's body. So the police have caught her, and she has now been tried, prosecuted for unaliving some people, and it puts her on death row. And so poor Ellie has been in prison now for 5 years, and Lothaire's left her there because he knows it's the safest place for her to keep her away from his enemies. And at the start of this book then, after the events of the other books until this point, he then kind of breaks her out just in time before she is put to death, and then keeps her captive while he continues to work on his plan to get rid of her, of course, over time. And what we know is that she is in fact his fated mate, but it takes him a long time to come to terms with this, and then he's going to have to pay the penalty for this mistake that he's made. I really did enjoy this one. Like I said, I love this whole world, this whole backstory. all of the characters and setting it up for more stories in the future. My only criticism of this book really is the fact that it was really long, and it felt long reading it. And while I don't think that any of the content was unnecessary, it just took me about 4 nights to read, and I really kind of felt the length of this book, and so as a result this wasn't quite a 5-star read for me, but it's still absolutely fantastic and a 5-star series overall. Okay, so we're finally at the 18th book that I read this month, and my favourite read of the month, and the only fully 5-star read that I had as well, and that is Sicko by Amo Jones. This is 5-star, like I said, 4 on the spice scale, and I read it as Kindle Unlimited. This is a dark romance. As far as I know, it's a standalone romance, and I guess you could say it's an MC romance as well. This is a very dark read indeed. Lots and lots of content warnings for this one, so please check all the content warnings, check all the trigger warnings, but there's some BDS elements to this one, definitely sexual assault. We have non-consent, dubious consent, and there's a sex club involved. These couple are step siblings, very much a damaged hero and heroine, forced proximity, and an obsessed over-the-top hero. And we were following Royce and Jade. So Royce and Jade are step siblings. Jade was adopted by Royce's parents, but they've known each other since they were little. Royce is 3 years older than her, and so very much since she was a baby, Royce has been her big brother, but he's been obsessed with her since she was a baby, and very protective of her as well. And as she grew up, they were very much best friends. They were always together, and she hangs out with not only him but his friends as well, who also very much protect her. So she's not allowed other boyfriends, she doesn't really have too many other friends, and it's very clear that Royce and Jade are in love with each other. But obviously when they're living together in the house, this is very kind of taboo, but also they're too young at this point. However, he's just turned 18, she is 15, and him and his friends are obviously going to be going away to college. Now it's clear that he is very obsessed and protective of her, and so they're not looking forward to really spending any time apart. The thing is, they end up having to part much sooner than they even think they're going to, because at the start of the summer holidays something happens to him and his friends, and he ends up leaving town very abruptly without saying anything to her, and kind of leaving her. Once he's left, it leaves her completely unprotected, and something very awful happens to her, in that pretty much the night that he leaves, a man climbs into her window, sexually assaults her, and over the course of the next 3 years grooms her to become his sex slave, essentially. So she is very resentful of the fact that Royce left her, and is obviously really struggling to deal with what has been going on with her. But now she's 18 and she herself is going away to college, and she ends up going to LA, and she thinks this is going to be the end of her abuse, but the man follows her to where she goes, and she has to continue to do whatever he says. Meanwhile, we find out that Royce, when he left, ended up joining a motorcycle club, and in fact he's now the VP of this motorcycle club, and his MC name is Sicko. So the name of this book is kind of named after our hero Royce. And when he knows that she's gone to LA, his MC is also in LA, he comes back into her life, and he is very high-handed, expects her to toe the line, forces her to go to the clubhouse. And it's very interesting to see how she integrates into clubhouse life, what some of the club whores think about her, how she's treated by the other old ladies. And it's obvious that Sicko is completely changed. He's not the boy that left, although even Royce was very possessive. He could be very morally grey, he could be quite violent, but now he is even more so, and he has become Sicko. And they're gonna have quite a toxic relationship between them, and all this time she's obviously hiding a dark secret of her own, and she can't bring herself to tell him that when he left her completely exposed and something bad has happened to her. But we also discover there's something equally terrible happened to Royce, which drove him away which led him to where he is, and we just uncover loads and loads more. I absolutely loved this one, although it was very grueling to read in parts. It's very, very dark. It's one of the darkest romances I've read for quite a while. There's lots of plot reveals in this one, lots of things we didn't know about the characters and we kind of discover as we go along, and I think Amo Jones definitely kept me guessing. So I had some thoughts about who was doing what, how everyone was connected, but I didn't guess it all, and like I said, it kept me on the edge of my seat. I was absolutely fascinated by this read, and despite how dark some of this content was, how difficult a lot of it was to read, I was absolutely enthralled and thought it was absolutely fantastically written, and just enjoyed every moment of it. If enjoyment is the right word, probably isn't, but would highly recommend. If you really like a dark romance, then I'd highly recommend Sicko if you haven't read it yet. Okay, there we go, we made it. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I've had to stop the camera 5 or 6 times now to let it cool down, so it's taken me a long time to record it, and I'm pretty sure it will be a pretty long video, but I'll try my best in the editing process to cut it down so you're not sitting there too long. But if you did make it all the way to the end, then I really do appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching, for sticking with me right until the end. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and all that's left for me to do is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. I've actually put some little acronyms in my notebook rather than spelling things out in full, and now I can't remember what CC stands for, but I think it's cat to captive. So, and it's book 1 in the lichens and it's book 1 in the lichens